Hello, welcome to the Open Resourcery with your host Devi, Twisted, and yours truly, Lono. Today we'll be going over the metaphysical and spiritual properties of air. How exciting.
Super exciting.
Damn straight.
Breathe in that good ass prana, baby.
Yes.
Take that. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to be Ralph Sharp. But it does come to mind when I think about air. Is prana, right? You were discussing prana before
Mm-hmm.
a while ago. Well, me and Devium. And I can't quite remember how we got onto that topic, but it had something to do with Eskimos, right?
No, prana, because I was looking into how different cultures associate air. And a lot of it, is breath of life kind of thing. Yeah. And in the Hindu tradition, what I was seeing as kind of a repeating pattern is prana being the breath of life. And this is how energy moves. We breathe it in, we exhale the old, that kind of recycling movement of air within the self.
It's similar to the Hawaiian tradition of Ha, or the breath of life, and the way that you share the Ha with people is through your mana, and you'd share your mana with someone else through the breath, and you'd take in their breath, and you take in their breath, and your respect would then mingle together and you'd become one people. I think that tradition has been on this planet for a really long time. I can't quite pinpoint where it originated from in the world, but I know that a lot of Native American tribes and especially the Inuit, as I said, they use the Eskimo kiss as Hollywood is so-called made
Dubbed it.
famous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not really moving your nose across each other. It's actually putting your foreheads against each other like the Polynesians and breathing in the same air.
Mm-hmm.
It's uh it's very, how should I say, meditative. It's very conscious
It,
of yourself and others, I guess.
it's a conscious intimacy for certain.
That consciousness brings me to the Buddhist perspective of air, or the Hindu perspective of air, which is that air takes your prayers away up into the heaven,
Mm-hmm.
and that by writing your prayers on a cloth, a prayer cloth, and hanging it where the wind can take it, signifies that your intentions are manifested in the world, your needs are met, and that your spiritual well-being is protected and cared for. And I think that's like really, it's really interesting. I just looked up, I just found this out, that the Dalai Lama came to Hawaii in 2018. And the interesting thing about that experience, as I watched it on YouTube, because I wasn't there. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't there on the beach. But they hung a prayer cloth on the mast of the canoe with nothing on it, just a white linen cloth, signifying. I'm not sure what it would signify. It would signify all Buddha, all Buddha nature towards the cause of the Hokulea and their journey around the world and whatnot. I know I jumped around with that, but
Well, it makes sense because we've been watching so many damn videos about the ukulele lately.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's too much boat stuff. But to make it short, there's a boat here that sailed around the world using the stars, only the stars. And while it was docked in Honolulu in 2018, uh, the Dalai Lama and his entourage came and blessed it with a traditional chant and prayer cloth, prayer cloth and mantras, and also Hawaiian Polynesian chants, basically mingling their mana through the air they created around themselves.
Now, and actually going ahead and mentioning that, right? I actually have been just going ahead and since we're having this conversation, looking up different entities and such that are of air, whether they be gods or just elementals or whatever. But you mentioning the Hokulea and that sailed around the world, and us having gone ahead and delved into it quite a bit. It seems that the Hawaiian god of the wind and inventor of the sail is Paka. I'm probably mispronouncing that, so native Hawaiians, don't get upset. But yes, Paka happens to be the god of the wind and the inventor of the sail. And let's say for those who believe in said gods and entities and deities, would have been the one overseeing the Hokulea going around the world.
It's really interesting how air is so intermingled with our life. Yeah, I can't almost specific instance where I used air magic. Just purely air magic. It's always been something else with air, for me specifically. And I wanted to know how you guys felt about that.
I would agree. For the most part, in air, the rituals that I was looking up, the ways that I use it personally, I mean, we have, of course, we start with the breath of life, but the breath of life is the culmination. Like, even if we look in like Christian tradition, right? It's breath of life going into a form that's already created. So it has something to do with the soul, but also the breath. We have meditation, and meditation really is taking in the air. So it's acting with the body, acting with, water in the body, with all the other functions of the body. So it's not the air itself that is assisting with meditation. Communication, but that, of course, also goes back to working in tandem with the body in and of itself. But air is one of those aspects where it is so important and is all encompassing because it's literally everywhere. That it can be overlooked very, very easily. But I mean,
yes, and go ahead.
sorry. I mean, we've got cleansing that's done, either, if somebody is saging, doesn't necessarily have to be sage, but using the smoke, that's, in tandem
Or
with
smudging.
fire, smudging, saging, smudging, but cleansing and clearing with that kind of energy. Heck, people throw open their windows whenever it's like the first beautiful day after like a long winter, just to get all the stagnant energy and air out, right? That's something that's done not even necessarily as a quote magical practice, but for a practical purpose as well. And it helps recirculate better energy into the home. So I am sorry, I interrupted you, Twisted. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, I was gonna say that. So, in terms of the whole question of how exactly does one incorporate air into magic, right? Whether it's been like, uh, obviously, we're talking right now, and in talking, a lot of magic is performed by actually verbalizing things, as you guys have witnessed. I've done it myself with you guys, or you guys have done it as well. And this goes back, going on the Jewish, Christian, Islamic, all the Abrahamic lore and such, to the good old book of Genesis, right? And pretty much, the word is what went ahead and manifested everything. The God, he went ahead and he flew over the waters, as it were, but then the word brought everything into existence. And what exactly is the word? It's vibration, and vibration in and of itself is correlated with what? Air. So, actually, I have a particular thing right here. So you talked about the prana before, right? And that being the air element, that being like, actually like the spirit, the breath and such, which is of course mirrored in, the Bible. And in regards to bringing life to things, including human, including man, I have right here the actual verse from the book of Genesis, this being chapter 2, verse 7. I'm reading the NIV, New International Version translation. Right here it states, "Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground," so that's earth, "and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life," and there goes the air part, "and man became a living being." Now that right there, pretty straightforward and simple. And for those who know the basic elements and those properties, and obviously those who don't know, hence why we're going ahead and talking about it in the first place to inform those. But yeah, there's that right there. Pretty much being like, all right, you got the physical mortal coil, and then you go ahead and you put that spirit into it. And obviously the other two elements in the Western and Abrahamic understanding, they play their parts as well when it comes to fire and water. And to go ahead and talk about the actual like other elements and how they correlate and such within that particular framework, we got ourselves. So if you want to think of the different bodies that a person has, right? Now, when we think of body, we usually think of it as a physical body, and that would be correlated with the elements of earth. So then, using the modern hermetic ordered golden dawn interpretation of the elements, right? We have the earth, that's the physical body. Then kind of going up, you could say like a hierarchy. You have air, which is masculine, as opposed to earth being feminine, and that is the mental right there. Then you have above that the water, which is feminine, that is, the emotional. And then you have above that the fire, which in of itself is the soul, the spirit, you could say, and that being, more so masculine and all that. So going ahead and touching upon that, when you look at, say, the Kabbalistic tree of life, right? There's all these different spears and such, but then there's this one concept of how like there are 4 worlds that exist on it, right? That are kind of like encapsulated when you go ahead and you talk about the name of God being Yahweh. Now, there's many names of God that are associated with, um, the tree of life and, Kabbalah in of itself. But so when you actually go ahead and say the four aspect name of God being Yahweh, it breaks down to the Hebrew letters and characters of Yod He Vav He. So air in of itself would be the first He in that right there, which I believe you mentioned earlier. Ha was one of the names, as well as we already addressed prana. And also what comes to mind is the Egyptian Ka, Egyptian word Ka, or character Ka, being their term for the breath and the soul in of itself. Yeah, I definitely got a bit more to go ahead and talk about, but based on what I've said so far, do you guys have anything like that came to mind?
I do have an additional being the Chinese systems. Um, they have also in much the same line is qi, and you hear a lot of that in like martial arts and things of that nature, where they're releasing um, the breath whenever they go to hit, right? To put more force behind it. So there is force behind the air, um, which creates a harder hit.
There's also the reading of the chi with incense, where you put the incense in the dragon's mouth, and by the direction the smoke goes, you can determine your fortune. and whether your prayer was answered or not. No, I'm
So
not
that
sure how
right
that
there,
one works. I've only ever done that once, and that was in Chinatown. It was a dim
Chinatown where
sum.
though? Chinatown where?
No,
Just
Honolulu,
out of curiosity.
like downtown.
Oh, you mean like over there on the island? Okay. And so we have the zodiacal signs of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius to go ahead and discuss, of course. And if we're going to go ahead and do a little dip into tarot and the archetypes, we got ourselves the sword archetype going ahead and correlating with air in of itself. And obviously, we went ahead and talked about the whole story of like the word uh, being what brought existence into fruition in the Abrahamic lore. And so communication, those vibrations in of itself, the vibrations, oscillations, being what makes life, go ahead and do its thing. And those sound waves in themselves, that communication, we want to think about planetary energies that's tied to. That's Mercury, right? So, and funny enough, when we're going ahead and recording this, happens to be a Mercury retrograde of all things, which, the nature of that actually muddies up communication in of itself, and in a variety of means and manners. But if we want to go ahead and talk about, like, say, the Mercury archetype of like who you could potentially call upon for that, what entities are associated with that Mercury archetype. So of course, Mercury, from the Greco-Roman pantheon, which alternatively is named Hermes, and then very closely associated with that is Thoth, and also, even though usually utilized in the Western like ceremonial magic tradition as Earth, from our individual findings, Uriel happens to be a mercurial sort of archangel as well. To keep it on the actual theme of archangels, Raphael is the usual archangel associated with the element of air, even though um, they don't inhabit the sphere of Mercury itself on the tree of life. That actually is Michael. That's Michael. So when I was going ahead and discussing previously the Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn's like hierarchy system and such, they are known for having played around with and actually obscuring the order of the elements within their systems and such for whatever purpose, whether of a you know beneficial, like, hey, look, you go ahead and you figure it out for yourself, you'll actually tap into the real stuff, or just want to keep it secret for their own purposes, whatever purposes they may have had, they did some changing around as opposed to older grimoires and older works going ahead and denoting a different sort of hierarchy. But in that case, right, Raphael and Michael are like switched. So Raphael, and mentioning that they're usually associated with air, and how modern magicians usually do things. There has been a debate for a while of the interchangeability of Raphael and Michael for the fire and the air sort of element in of itself. And granted, they're both masculine, and granted, it takes air to go ahead and like, perpetuate and light fire in of itself. So it's kind of like, they support one another. But um, if you're gonna go ahead and try to work with the actual sphere of Mercury to try to tap into the air element, you'll be going ahead and doing that with Mikael. Um, Now, aside from just Abrahamic, and sort of like Western. Well, in terms of Western, I can actually go ahead and talk about Amun, who is the Egyptian god of creation and the wind, and you also got Shu, who's god of the air as well in the Egyptian, and also Njord from the Norse Germanic pantheon, who is the wind god, and also Odin, happening to be the mercurial one in that pantheon, is thought by some to be a god of air and breath as well. And considering that he is the All Father, he's the Sky Daddy of that pantheon, trying to make some sense. And also talking about having brought up Hermes slash Mercury from the Greco-Roman pantheon. The air elementals are called sylphs, and when it comes to the breeze actually being personified, I know that when it comes to magical, spiritual sort of stuff, there's talk about auras. Like, dude, like, can I see your aura, man? Like, what color is your aura, dude? Like, oh, bro, like, you have such radiant aura and all that sort of thing. Well, the actual name for the breeze, like, personified as an entity, as a thing, is the name aura. And Aurai is the nymphs of the breeze, and it being used in a pluralistic sense. Now, when we go ahead and we talk about, like, say, a couple Eastern entities that you can call upon, that's where so your flavor in the Japanese and Shinto pantheon. We have Fujin, who is the wind god, and even though one had mentioned him in the Metaphysics of Water video as well, we have Susanoo as well because they are the god of storms. And yeah, I think that pretty much gives a good extensive list of different entities one can call upon if they're wanting to harness the air in of itself.
Fully
So, do you
agreed.
guys have any additional thoughts on that, or?
I mean, air, the funny part about talking about the aspects of air is because it's so all encompassing, it's so hard to pinpoint because it's inside of everything. But I think that pretty much covers like baseline and maybe a little further, at least from my perspective.
Okay, I'm content. I'm good with that.
Air rhymes with prayer. Read your Bibles. Pray every day, and you'll grow, grow, grow.
Hallelujah.
All right.
So yes, that right there was us talking about air, and this is Mr. Twisted, and we got ourselves a Divinium, and we got ourselves a Lono over here. Good old hee-haw to the rest of y'all folks out there.
Yeah.
Hee-haw. And stay frosty, niggas.
Stay frosty.
Yeah.
Yo, Twisted here real quick, tacking this on as a little addendum to the Metaphysics of Air conversation we just had now. Earlier on in the recording, I went ahead and stated that from the Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn hierarchy of elements, that the elements of air would be associated with the first Hey of the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God and such, and in doing so, I was inaccurate. Now, in the traditional sense, before the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn went ahead and rearranged a couple of the elements and such, those being air and water, that would have been correct. But when you're using the modern interpretation, it would not be the first Hey in the Tetragrammaton that would correlate. It's actually Vav. So take that as you will. And yes, that's all I really wanted to go ahead and rectify in regards to that conversation. So yeah, this is Twist with Open Sorcery, and stay frosty, Neguses. Peace.